Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Maple Minds Podcast. Uh, my name is Calvin Stevens. I come from the unceded territory of Mi'kma'ki. Um, Tonight, we're going to have some interesting discussions. And along with me here is paddling my canoe and Smarshy, and I'm going to give them a chance to introduce themselves. Paddling my canoe.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good evening in some spots, no matter where you're joining us across Turtle Island. Thank you for tuning in. My name is Paddling My Own Canoe. I go by Mo, and I am actually located the same as Maple, where the Maple Mod podcast originates from. Please remember to subscribe and to like our podcast. We are here on the unceded territories of the Lekwungen speaking people, the Sanjis, and the Esquimalt nations. I'm originally from Unama'ki, Mi'kma'ki territory. And welcome to our podcast. Smarshy, take it away.
Hello, everybody. I'm Smash. I come from Treaty 7 territory in Alberta. And it's the territories of the Kainai, the Piikani, the Tsuut'ina, the Siksika, and the Stoney Nakoda Nation. Thank you.
So, as we know, we are hot off a federal election. I hope that we've seen different takes. Tonight we're going to also talk about King Charles, um, and as well a little bit about UNDRIP, and that will be our topic for the next podcast. Calvin,
Yes.
did you want to speak about the election in your area and what's happening?
Do we want to start off with that? Of course,
Sorry.
we can speak about the election here in my community.
No,
Um,
I'm sorry if I'm off track. Please go ahead back to the schedule. I am sorry, everyone.
no, let's start off with that. I don't mind at all. Um, when we look at elections in First Nation communities, uh, all elections in First Nation communities really are ran in the same basic system. It's not hard to understand. But if you're not versed in political science, it will be mysterious to you. Um, Polling typically isn't done in First Nation communities. So the way First Nation communities work is everybody gets elected based on popularity, and it's based on the electoral system of the Indian Act. Um, because we have been so immersed in this system, politicians have actually gotten the chance to master it. And so we have career politicians that are there pretty much most of their lives. And this is not just in my community, this is common in all communities across Canada and First Nation communities. So, how the system is ran. Um, Before the electoral system came into place, we were governed by Indian agents. Basically, these were non natives that came into the reserve that governed and controlled every aspect of First Nation lives. So, with that system, um, people who spoke out against the Indian agents were punished. People that didn't agree with the policies these Indian agents practiced or mandated, if they didn't like them, then maybe some of their um, rations were taken away. And that's why a lot of First Nation communities call it a ration check, which is social assistance. It stems historically from the day when Indian agents used to control the reservations. So you In every First Nation community, this system, when Indian agents left First Nation communities, and it was replaced with the electoral system of the Indian Act, this same ideology stuck. And so we have politicians that form a quorum and they have a strong control over what happens in the communities. And people in the communities aren't typically asked what they would like their community, what direction they would like their community to go. And so if people in First Nation communities question their leaders, I would say it doesn't happen in all communities, but in a large portion of First Nation communities, that same practice of punishing those people who practice their democratic right to ask questions and hold people accountable, it, it, they're punished basically, and so it creates a system where our voices have been quieted. Our true democratic freedoms and our rights are squashed. And for the longest time, First Nation communities just accepted this type of life. But the more educated we get and the more versed we become in political science, we have more and more people starting to ask for accountability within First Nation communities. And so the system is slowly changing. Uh, in my own community here, this is a beautiful community, I must say. My community is very advanced compared to a lot of First Nation communities that are isolated around Canada. So we have that going for us. But if we practiced some of the political strategies that we used during the federal election and the group that we worked with, and we did a lot of polling, and JD, which was the creator of smartvoting.ca, he helped us and educated us at smart voting. And so we targeted write-ins all across Canada. My profile was 6 First Nation communities, 6 write-ins with First Nation communities on those write-ins that can affect change. And we targeted those write-ins. We used smartvoting.ca, and we used the polling data to educate people on how to get, for example, Michelle Ferrari was an incumbent in her ride in Peterborough, Ontario. There was no chance, there was zero chance of unelecting her and getting her out of Parliament. But we used smartvoting.ca and we targeted those write-ins in those communities. And so people actually saw for the first time that they have a direct influence on the outcome of elections. And no longer people didn't feel like, oh, my vote doesn't matter. Yes, every vote matters. Recently, we have had recounts of 2 write-ins. Uh, the Liberals won by 1 vote. 1 vote. So people cannot say their vote doesn't matter anymore. It really does. It's a beautiful thing that people are actually practicing their democratic right and responsibilities all across the country, especially in First Nation communities. And the same thing, a conservative won in another recount by 4 votes. By 4 votes. I'm sure there was somebody in that ride-in, a family of 4, that said, "Oh man, we should have went to go vote." So this is what's happening in, I believe, in my own community. People are realizing that their vote matters, and they're starting to become strategic about it. And I try to do polling in my community, and I did a sample polling of 643 or 647 uh, poll votes That's how many people participated in my polling, and it it said, the data said that 51% of those people that are polled wanted the existing chief to stay as chief. And then I would see, okay, this person, the next runner-up had 35% of the electorate, of the people that were polled, and then another person had 9%, and then another person had 3%, and another person had 1%. But when you totaled up all of those percentages, it equaled up to be 49%. So if people started voting strategically and voted smart, it would be literally a neck and neck race. And I think this is beautiful. In First Nation elections, people typically are encouraged to run. So we have so I think one year I think we had like 8 people running for chief. But when we do that, we split the vote, and the existing incumbent chief comes in. And then one year, I think we had like close to 100 people running for council. And when that happens, the existing politicians that are already in there, it benefits them because they have a strong base. And this is the education that we were doing here, or that I was doing here in my community. And I was posting it on my TikTok. And I was amazed by the number of First Nation communities that reached out to me, and they were like, could this be done in my community? Because everybody has well intentions of wanting to run in political office. But when we have so many running to try to affect change, it actually helps prevent change. And I think more and more people are realizing that today. And I think it's a beautiful thing. Um, I think education is key. And political science and strategic voting and smartvoting.ca, I think opened the eyes of a lot of Canadians and a lot of First Nations. And tomorrow is our election day. I wish all the candidates the very best and good luck. And yeah, that's it.
Mm,
Oh, there you go.
okay, you can hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
sorry about that. It's funny that you should mention education. I was advised actually by an elder a couple of days ago that, and we were talking about the urban Indigenous voice, because we're hearing, a lot of the nations are speaking up and being brought into council, but how do we have that urban Indigenous voice represented? And that should be through our friendship centers.
You cut out. You
I
mentioned
can hear
something about
you.
the
I can hear
Can
her.
you can
Yeah.
you hear me?
Yeah, you're good. You didn't
Okay,
cut out.
I can.
Yeah, we
Okay,
can
I
hear
can hear
you.
you now. So what we were talking about is, how do we as people step into the roles, such as on municipal councils, on school boards, on federal government, provincial government, and other committees. Um, and that is going to be by maybe doing a training program through friendship centers, other outreach centers, so that our voices are heard. And we might not see much this generation, but we need to start building for the following generations. That is strength. And we need to work together. Our urban voices need to come together with our nation voices so we can do this walk together. And I'm excited for the future. I'm seeing a lot of our youth using their voices. Even my own son, who's a Nook, asking questions about, how come he doesn't have the same rights as another nation? And that's because of colonialism and the government dividing us because they don't want us to be powerful together. So,
Exactly.
Smarty, what are your thoughts around what we're speaking about and how we empower one another through education and going forward and using our voices and being smart, as Calvin said?
Right, and I think you're absolutely right when you say that. I think going to friendship centers and holding education classes and getting our youth and children and our elders and the other people in the community involved in actually giving them the knowledge and the tools that we have is absolutely imperative. Because if we don't give the tools and the knowledge of what the elders have to give us, how are we going to make it better for the 7 generations next? The next 7 generations. It doesn't work if you don't put in the
Yeah.
effort. So yeah, I think that's a big thing that we need to
I
start
think
doing.
now, yeah, and I think now, uh, because of this election, this federal election, Indigenous people realize that we have to be at the table. We have to get involved in politics. And exactly what Paddle in My Canoe said, I think we should have more education and training in friendship centers, encourage our people to get versed in politics, encourage them to take political science and get out there, get into parliament. We have so many people in parliament now that are First Nation. We have a cabinet consistent of more First Nation people than ever before. It's only fair. Hey, this is our territory, and we should be sitting at the table making those decisions for our Indigenous brothers and sisters. It wasn't too long ago that our grandfathers and our grandmothers were not allowed to vote. It was our grandfathers that weren't allowed to vote. And think about that. That was only our grandfathers, my grandfather, your grandfather, your grandfather, your grandmother, your grandmother was not allowed to vote. And now we have First Nation people in the cabinet in Canada. I mean, how amazing is that, man? Like, we've exploded as people.
Absolutely couldn't have said it better myself.
Speaking about Parliament, we're just days away before Parliament is going to reopen. And we all know that it will be a historical moment, um, many decades in the making, that Mark Carney, Prime Minister Mark Carney, let's give him the respect that he deserves by calling him by his title, Prime Minister, reached out through his connections and went to the King and said, you need to come to Canada to show that you support us as a Commonwealth and to open our Parliament. Now, we all know the history between the Crown and Indigenous people. So, this is going to be very interesting, especially now that we have three high profile matriarchs that are going to be sitting in that room. And another point to mention as well, as when they had the swearing in ceremony, there was a youth who sang the national anthem in their native language, which I believe was, oh, I'm sorry, I'm tearing up,
Cree.
was Cree. And to me, just hearing that spoke volumes.
Yeah.
So this is, I mean, he is right now walking the walk. It's going to be interesting. I'm sitting back with mixed reviews on the King coming. And as long as our people's voices are brought into that ceremony as well and heard, I think it will set a good path forward. Smarty, how are you feeling about this?
Um, to be honest, not the greatest, but I do know it signifies that the Crown still recognizes us Canada as a Commonwealth country. I'm not going to hide my feelings for the king. I don't think it, personally, I don't think it's a good idea, but I get the significance of the dignitaries getting together and coming to the opening of Parliament, and I understand that. But just like you paddling my canoe, Mo and Calvin, um, I'm very, very um, sketchy when it comes to this because I don't know. It could go good, it could go bad. But again, walking with 2 feet in, one side being skeptical, one side being happy, I have to trust that we made the right decision for not only Indigenous people, but for the non-Indigenous people walking with us. And that's my take on that. What do you think about it, Calvin?
What do I think about it? I think, to me, and this is my personal view, I think it's a brilliant idea. And I'm going to explain myself why. I think it's a great thing. Um, Colonialism was a bad thing, okay? It decimated First Nation communities all across North America, both in the United States and in Canada. And colonialism was with the British. But you have to understand, colonialism was practiced with all countries that were expanding and trying to expand their wealth within within the world. No one talks about it. The French colonialist in the continent of Africa was horrible to the indigenous population there. The Spanish was incredibly horrible to the indigenous population in South America. So, with that being said, yes, the British were horrible to First Nations, but we survived. We can We have to move forward in reconciliation and recognize that there are things that has happened in the past, and that's the whole point of reconciliation: recognizing the past, accepting the past, but moving forward. It, I think, is also an important statement for the king to come do the statement here in Canada. That being that our treaties are with the British Crown. And for him to come down here and speak reaffirms the strength of our treaties. So to me, it's a beautiful thing. It's a great thing. Are you guys there? You want to keep talking?
Yep, we're here.
Okay.
Well, I understand your point of view, Calvin. Um, I agree that it's the reconciliation that we need to look at the past, recognize it, accept what we cannot change,
Yeah.
but there's still the hesitancy of that relationship with First Nations, Métis, and Inuit with the
Yeah.
Crown. And I think that is a long time healing. But again, I can see your view in what you said, and I'll walk with that because I do believe it signifies that we're moving towards a right direction. It's just going to take a long time for us to get to the right direction, if that
Oh,
makes
of
sense.
course. Of course. And I'm not discounting the trauma and the generational trauma that we've experienced from it. Um, it's there, it's present within our own children in this generation, and it's going to be present in our future generations. I guess my biggest standpoint is we can't deny the past, but we have to move forward together. And only moving forward together could we draw strength from one another. And divided, we are conquered, but together we are strong. And this is how I view our partnership with the Crown and with Canada. And it's unfortunate that there has been a lot of trauma, and there still is trauma. When we're dealing with the government, we don't have 100% trust with them, and rightfully so. Um, we have to start building bridges and the distrust that we have for one another isn't going to forward that agenda. So one of us, and I think First Nations have this ability, can be the bigger person, because First Nations, they believe wholeheartedly that their basic premises is on forgiveness.
Absolutely. While I agree with you on that, I'm going to push back a little bit.
Oh
The
yeah.
and you're absolutely right. We do need to move forward, and we do need to look at the generational trauma that is there, and look at the trauma that has happened to our people. But I'm going to say I still have a little hesitancy of the king being here just because of the ties to the crown and the treaties and stuff like that. Is he going to actually honor what he says he's going to do? Is he going to back up Indigenous people the way Carney is trying to back up Indigenous people in the same aspect and realize that we are the first people on this con on this
Well,
in this country, and that's my biggest fear. Is he going to actually accept that this is the reality we need to go with?
um, when he comes down to Canada, he's not going to be allowed to express his personal opinion or speech. Um, Whatever he's going to be speaking to and from is Mark Carney's and his cabinet's words. So I guess I guess he won't have a chance to give the British Crown's perspective on it. Um, Whatever he's reading is the perspective of Carney's and his cabinet's agenda and their views and their words. Um, that's something we have to remember. But it would be good. I totally get what you're saying. It would be good if he did mention us on a side note. He could say, shout out to all the First Nations out there. It would be really cool to say that.
Well, here's some humor that I'm going to throw in there because I'm reading Jody Wilson Rayborn's latest book. And in it, she's talking about, and Calvin and I, we can take some pride in this because it's coming from our territories, of a letter that's being written back to King George III, so 1700s, where they're actually talking about, and I mean this, no offense to anyone. I was reminded to only say what your mother would want you to be proud of. So, but to contact, this is historically in the context. So please keep this in mind. So in this passage, in this letter, one person is writing to say that the white man can't be trusted, but the white man can be trusted. And I'm like, okay, what's the distinction? Well, the white man was the English, and the white man was the Frenchman, because there was such a strong relation in Mi'kmaq between the French and the Mi'kmaq people. So I thought that was quite interesting. Just a little bit of humor.
Let's talk about the significance of why the king is coming to address Parliament.
Hmm.
Why?
Why?
Why? Why is he coming here to address Parliament? When's the last time royalty has come to address Parliament? I think that is the golden question. And I do have a theory of why now, after all this time. When
Mhm.
would you like to hear that theory?
Well, can I give you my answer to that question?
Yes, yes. I
And then
want
I'll
your
hear
answer. I
your
want your
theory.
answer. Yes.
We know why. So we can stick it to, and I mean this no offense to my American relations, because it's not the people that are living in the United States of America, but to Donald Trump and to the rest of the world, to strengthen our bond with the Commonwealth, where we have to outreach to our trading partners and to tell Trump, guess what? We need to keep in mind, remember, What did Trump say to Carney when he visited in the United States? And he said, Carney was like, I've just spent the last several months speaking to the owners of Canada. And I can tell you that Canada is not for sale. And what did Trump say? Never say never. Now, Calvin, take it away.
Okay. I think the king coming down here to speak shows the entire world, not just to the United States, that we have friends that are democratic countries. All over the world, democratic countries are under attack. And the regular citizen of Canada and the United States does not know this because the majority of us work every day of our lives. So we don't have time to follow world politics. We've just had another election in, was that Poland? I think it was Poland. And there was the exact same scenario. There was an extremist right and people on the left trying to save democracy and then narrowly avoided the same fate as the United States. India,
It was Romania, sorry.
Romania, exactly. So this whole trend is all over the world. And I think the king coming over and speaking in parliament is sending a clear message at whoever and whatever is organizing this attack on democracy all over the world. Hey, we got each other's back. We're still here. We're still part of Canada. And if Canada needs us, we will be here. I think that, above all else, is the most important, significant reason why he's coming down here to speak.
Which I think is what we need to show Mr. Trump that whether he believes his delusions or he believes what he says, that this signifies that he can play around all the games that he wants, he can do and say whatever he wants, but when push comes to shove, we are still a democratic monarchy, and we are still protected under Commonwealth, and we're not a force to be reckoned with because we have the entire EU and the entire Commonwealth behind us. And
Yeah.
the democracy around the world that's being threatened by this evil, it will signify that we are not to be messed with. Not just Canada, but everywhere around the world, we are not to be messed with because you're starting a war and a fire that you can't put out. And that's a problem, in my
Yeah.
opinion.
Oh, yeah. I think the United States knows you cannot break the spirit. You can beat people up, you can invade them, you can take over their territory, but you can't take their spirit away. Russia has learned this from Ukraine. Indigenous people, through invasion of their lands, through residential schools, through genocide, through trying to make them mainstream non-indigenous people. Of all the things that has happened in the world and happened to us, you can't break the spirit. You will be hurt. You will be put in schools. You will forget a lot of parts of your identity, but your spirit will never be broken. And that's the same thing with Canada.
And to add to that point, Calvin, I also think that it sends a bigger message and a louder message that all Indigenous people around the world, we're not standing by anymore. We're idle no more. We are standing up with all our Indigenous brothers and sisters worldwide, and we are getting our message, and our voices are not going to be ignored. That's why I say we are idle no more. We're not
That's actually
standing
a good
by.
analogy. I love that.
Yeah, that's beautiful, guys. And we are unbreakable. And that is powerful. And that leads, I guess, a good segue into what we're going to be talking on our next podcast next Sunday, which is we are going to speak about UNDRIP and what UNDRIP means, what UNDRIP will look like in regards to the treaties. UNDRIP is not law, it is an act, as are our treaties. UNDRIP was put in place as a measure with the United Nations to make a bridge to repeal, rewrite, throw away the Indian Act. But what will that really mean for our rights and our freedoms? There's such a mixed message on UNDRIP, and next week we will get into it. And just, I guess, in closing, I would like to hear Calvin's and Smarshy's points on how they feel about UNDRIP and maybe any last comments that they want to say to those that have joined us today before we move along to questions. So, Calvin, I'll ask you to answer that question first, if you would, please.
Yes. The UNDRIP. I sometimes have a hard time because of my dyslexia organizing words. The United Nations Declaration of Indigenous Peoples. Am I correct? Yes.
Yes.
How do I feel about it? It's a repeat of what my people have already tried to do, and actually literally went to the United Nations. Our community members, G Captain Alex Denny, he was the Grand Captain for all of Mi'kma'ki, like the traditional government structure of my First Nation clan. He was the Grand Captain, which and traditionally he would be in charge of war and to gather all the forces together if our territories was ever come into question. So he went to the United Nations and he had our treaties recognized and our rights recognized by the United Nations. So he's already done that. And that was like, what, 50 years ago? And now the United Nations is actually making legislation. It was done 50 years ago, so why you doing it again? Why are you doing it again? Like, I don't know. I like it. I want to believe in it, but I don't know. I'm a little skeptical.
Smarshy?
Okay, where I do differ from this is under, yes, it needs to be a law that can't be overturned. But the thing that scares me is if we put that into law, what is that going to mean for the rights that we have now? And we've had this discussion, Mo. It scares me. It really does. Because, yes, you want to put it into law and make it not just an act, you want to keep it upheld. But the Indian Act is also upholding our rights and treaties, and it's so much more than just that. It's the depth of what the Indian Act means and how it was made, and all of that stuff that was made to put together the Indian Act. And now you want to take that and just throw it away for what we've worked so hard to get as First Nations, Métis, and Inuit. Now we have to go from the Indian Act of 1982 to a new act or law that's in place with the United Nations, but are they actually going to uphold the treaties and rights of First Nations and Métis and Inuit of Canada if we switch from one that we've had since for the last 43 years to one that we've just recently started talking about? That's my concern for that part.
So just to explain a little bit about the United Nations to the viewers out there. The United Nations is a governing body of member countries. Um, they provide declarations. So UNDRIP, the United Declaration of Indigenous Peoples' Rights, is a declaration for all the membering countries to follow. It's basically stating that Indigenous people of these countries have Indigenous rights and treaties that should be that not should be that is recognized, and this is their governing body for the entire world for membering countries. So it's up to each country to go back and take that declaration because they're a member country. They're basically saying yes, we agree to this declaration. We are a member of the United Nations. So our country, Canada, took home this declaration and they've made an action plan, I think, that has to be completed. Oh, and that's another thing. It doesn't have to. It's supposed to be uh, implemented by 2030 something. I don't know. And so and that's where Smarshy is stating that it could change some of the existing legislations here in Canada, which is the Indian Act, and there is a process within the action plan. Canada is trying to not trying to is going to implement on that. If
Very
that
good.
makes sense. If that makes sense to everyone. I didn't know if people understood what UNDRIP was, and I wanted to clear that up.
Any last comments that you want to leave before we move on to questions?
I really implore people to read the Indian Act and then read UNDRIP. It is a hefty read. It is a heavy read. If you're not Indigenous, please read the difference between the two because they may sound like, oh, yay, we're going to keep our rights. But while getting one into place with the United Nations, as Calvin had said, we get rid of one to get with the other. There's some things that will slip through the cracks. And that's what honestly just it terrifies me because we're protected class under the Indian Act. It wasn't great to begin with, but it does give us some of our rights and treaties. But then you take that away. So where do the treaties and rights to the land go if that's broken or taken away and then given UNDRIP, which is supposed to be 2026 to 2030. So we have about a year, maybe four, maybe five, maybe a year to 5 years before this becomes, and that's again Calvin saying that it doesn't just protect the Indigenous people of Canada, it's everyone in the United Nations that it protects. But the rights that we have under the Indian Act, even though the Indian Act was a racist legislation, we still have the rights that we have because of that. And that's what scares me. But I just implore everybody to read between the lines when you read it. Just understand it is a heavy read. I tried reading it this morning and I just couldn't because it's so much information to take in.
It is, and the way these declarations are worded are very generalized, and there's a lot of and I think that's done on purpose. It's these declarations are generalized, so it doesn't bind the United Nations from saying something it doesn't really mean. They can argue it and say, well, that's not what I meant. It's good lawyer talk. It's good lawyer strategy, but it allows each individual member country to define it as how their population sees it, and that's according to their own culture, and that's according to their population density, and that's according to their own history, because each country has a different history from Canada. Like I was saying, many countries in Africa were uh, horribly decimated by the French. So they have a very bad experience with the French compared to First Nation communities here in Nova Scotia, where we had a beautiful relationship with the French. So The word in the UNDRIP is I think specifically geared towards that purpose, and it allows each member country to um, like just what I said to take it and to interpret it and shape the action plan according to their history, their culture, and their needs.
Before we head over to TikTok to answer some questions, I guess final words that I want to say, I want to encourage all my brothers and sisters, Indigenous and non-Indigenous, to take the steps to educate and get involved. And it might seem overwhelmed. When I say involved, I mean involved in government, in your municipal levels, in your nations, in your communities, whether that be rural or urban, provincial and federal. And you can start off small. Join a school pack and then go for an executive office and work your way up. Let's come together and figure out how we can educate one another so we can make those roles. And I wish everybody an absolute wonderful week. I send you much love and many blessings. And thank you, Maple, for allowing us to have this wonderful space. I lift my hand up to both Calvin, to Smarshy, and to Maple.
Yes, Maple, we appreciate this. You allowing us to have this voice and discuss these things. You're an amazing person.
I appreciate your energy in educating because I'm learning a lot of stuff that I didn't know before. And I'm very thankful for the education. I find this, I think it's very, I can't think of the words I'm trying to say. I feel very honored to be invited into this space, to be able to have this space.
And I'm very thankful, Maple Minds and the team I work with on TikTok, and it has given me voice. It has given me purpose. 6-7 months ago, I felt helpless, and I knew what could happen to my children, to our future, to our country. And Maple Minds and the team that I work with gave me voice, gave me reach, and I am forever grateful for that. And it has encouraged me to continue my work, not only on my TikTok space, but also in my own community to bring to light the education of elections. Because I was speaking to an elder yesterday, which is uh, Albert Marshall, and he was saying we have a concept which is two-eyed seeing. And two-eyed seeing can be used in different ways. It can be used by how we see the world as Indigenous and non-Indigenous people. We have to see it with two eyes. We have to take both perspectives and put it together and look at it from a different angle. It's the same thing with the LGBTQ plus community and those people that are not part of the LGBT community. We have to look at the world through both lenses and then look outward and look into the future. And that's the same concept that I use. And it encourages me that, okay, there's the federal politics and political science of white people, non-Indigenous people. I don't want to be rude by saying white people. I just don't know what to say. Okay, of the European white system, right? And we have our traditional system as First Nations, but we have to apply the two-eyed seeing concept. There's the Indigenous system, and there's a white system of governance, and we have to put them together, and they have to work together and move forward together. And I think this is the basic concept, and you have allowed me to do that. And I think you've allowed all of us, Marcy, Paddle My Canoe, to do that. You've allowed us to give a voice and a space to bring First Nation perspective on elections. And you have the white people perspective on elections, and you're bringing us together to allow
Yeah,
us to move forward.
I do have to say, Paul, Maple, you have encouraged me to not only speak out on here to people to educate them, you've given me confidence into doing it outside of here and educating people. And I love that about you. You've given us the resource, like you've given us the time and the space where they think they are going to be talking about Indigenous issues, but you're giving the voice of Indigenous people to educate on Indigenous issues with the colonialistic non-Indigenous system and with the Indigenous system. Because what I've learned through my education course through the U of A, which is a very, very in-depth course, we had a self-governance system within our own sovereign nation. And then we had to adapt to the colonialistic system. So we have self-governance in Métis Nation and in within reserves and bands and settlements, but they don't see the intersectionality of that because they're looking at, well, this is the system, it's been this way forever. Why don't we go with that? But they're not educated on our self-governance where we had our own system. We don't have the same system that the colonialistic system runs today. And that's where you give us that depth to go
Yeah.
into that. And I feel very, very thankful and grateful for you allowing us to do this. So I just want you to know you're an amazing human. You should be proud of who you are right now.
Yeah. She's
You've come a long way.
100%. She's 100%. Um, we had every Indigenous community across Canada, whether it's Lakota, Métis, Mi'kmaq, Cherokee, Mohawk, Passamaquoddies. All of us had our own traditional governance systems. And this electoral system was imposed to us. And it has infected us and corrupted our way of thinking and the way we think of politics. We have to take the traditional way of how we see politics as First Nations, and we have to take the non-Indigenous way of politics, and we have to fuse them together to make something work for all Indigenous communities. Because the system that's in place right now within all Indigenous communities is corrupt. I'm not saying Indigenous communities individually are corrupt. I'm saying that the system encourages us to corrupt ourselves from within. So we need to go back to we need to take a more traditional approach to our politics moving forward.
Right. Absolutely. Because then without a colonialistic system, I think the corruption wouldn't be as robust as it is now.
Yeah.
Without just giving us money. I had a conversation with someone earlier and I was explaining it to her. I was like, the government system we have now was not the government system we had before colonialization happened. It was not the same. And that's why we're trying to fight to keep our governing system the way it is within our nations, because then we know that we are not just doing our due diligence in the colonialistic election that's now, but we're also bringing our people together and telling our people, you have a voice. You know you have a voice always. And that's a good thing that we're doing this discussion on
I
UNDRIP
had
and everything that comes apart.
I had an elder actually again this week mention that it's time because nation to nation we butt heads a lot, as Calvin said. Our system is causing a lot of corruption. So it's time we have to figure out that path. It's time to make that transition to a system that is going to serve us all more beneficial. and put egos aside. It's the only way that we can move forward. And again, he said it might not be this generation, it might not be the next generation, but we need to start doing that work, and we need to start doing it now.
Yeah.
And with that, should we move over to TikTok to answer some questions? Mabel.
Sure.
So please join us over
Oh,
on
sorry.
TikTok. Thanks for coming back.
It's like
I'd
I'm
like to
watching
be-
your mouth move, but I'm not hearing anything.
I know, I like
that's
the
what
tap
was moving
on-
my mind.
The tap on the headphones is perfect. I'm like, what the heck? That's my my elderly thing where I forget to unmute myself when I'm talking.
Oh my God, Polly.
Anyways, yes, I think we should move over to TikTok. I'm going to try and transition us over.
Okay.
And then once we're over there, if each of you could comment so I can make sure that you're super mods so you can let down and put up your own guests in case there's, yeah. And then that way I have no control over it. You guys can just
Okay.
do your own thing.
What do you want me to do?
Comment when you're over there, when we're done this,
Okay.
when we're done the YouTube one, which we're not done yet. So Paddling Mike, do you want to close it out and ask people to subscribe?
Absolutely. I would ask not only, first, I would like to ask if you have topics that you would like to hear your Indigenous voice, would you like to be a guest on the Maple Minds Indigenous Voice podcast? Please reach out for us. All of us are very open, and we would like to hear what you have to say. Remember, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, share, and follow. And let's see you over on TikTok. Much love, many blessings.
Bye, YouTube.
Bye, YouTube.